to another episode of Turn Left. I am your host, Indiana's own Dana Black, coming to you live. Yes, all the way live from Black Pearl Studios, where we talk about Indiana politics from the left side of things. But hold on for just a second. We're going to get to the politics in just a minute. Now, do y'all remember last year when I did my birthday fundraiser and it was for Trinity Haven? Well, I told you guys that we had our ribbon cutting last month, and it's exciting because we now have young people living in a space that is affirmative. But before I get started, I want to talk to you a little bit about our host homes program. No, wait, I'm not going to talk about it. No. I am going to let my dear friend and the most amazing person on the planet tell the story. Hold, please. I got skills these days. I'm doing amazing stuff over here.
Hi, my name is Jenny White. My pronouns are she or they, and I am the Executive Director of Trinity Haven. I'd like to talk to you today about our Host Homes program. Host Homes is a short-term housing option that we have designed specifically for LGBTQ youth and young adults ages 16 to 24 right here in Marion County. Host homes are meant to be short-term so that a young person can work very intensively with a case manager on what their goals are as it relates to education, employment, well-being, and ultimately permanent housing. It's an opportunity to have a safe, secure space that is welcoming and affirming in the home of a member of our community. Individuals and families are asked to open their home and invite you to stay with them for approximately 6 months so that you can have some time to work with your case manager, repair your relationship with your family if that is an option for you, and then determine what your next steps are. Our staff is ready to support you as you make those steps towards independence. You don't have to do it alone. Just remember, the Host Homes program is meant to be a short-term intervention. And so if you are on the verge of being independent, you're ready to take that next step, but you still need just a little bit of time to get your feet underneath you and have some stability, this might be a housing option for you. You can reach out to us on our website or the information that's available on the screen, and we'll make sure that you get connected to the right person so that you can have a more meaningful conversation about what this housing option might mean for you. We can't wait to talk to you more about this. We hope that you will consider this as you explore what options are available for you on your journey. We look forward to hearing from you. But for now, stay safe and take good care.
Yo, how cool is that? How cool is that? So you see, I'm more than just a loudmouth. I'm really about the community. And again, this year, I will be having my second annual birthday fundraiser for Trinity Haven because, LGBTQ plus youth are at risk of being homeless at a higher rate than the rest of our youth. Now, don't get me wrong. We want to, work with everybody, but there are many places around our state, specifically in Marion County, that, they ain't all that cool. And they're not all that affirming. And so this space is going to make sure that those people, those young people who need just a little bit of help, have an opportunity. And if you have room in your heart and in your home, please consider becoming a host home for a young person who could use it. All right. That is my civic duty work for the day. Now it's time for my rant. And I only have one. Today. And it's a humdinger, baby. So did y'all see where the 19 GOP House members sent a letter to our governor asking him to write an executive order preventing IU from essentially having a vaccine mandate before they come back on campus. The Journal Gazette reports 19 Republican state representatives sent a letter Tuesday to Governor Holcomb asking him to block Indiana University's policy requiring students, faculty, and staff to get the vaccine. Local Representative Peggy Mayfield and a whole host of other people sent this letter. Now, on the surface, you're probably thinking, well, that's the Republican-y thing to do. You know, we want to, control what everyone does. But here's the hoo-ha and the whiplash. Didn't these guys and ladies just pass legislation in the State House in this 2021 session restricting Governor Holcomb's ability to write executive orders during a pandemic? Didn't he actually veto that bill? And didn't they, after session, override that veto? Now Governor Holcomb had to get counsel. And Todd Rokita's like, yo, the governor can't sue. And all these tax dollars are being spent on this thing because they wanted to restrict the governor from being able to write executive orders. But then you turn around and write a letter asking him to write an executive order. See, look, I know people in the Republican Party want us to take them seriously. They want us to believe that they have all the character and leadership that is required to be a supermajority in our state house. But y'all, real talk, does that even sound like anything that we would want to follow? Doesn't it sound like we got some issues, some real down home issues, like my mama used to say from Mississippi over in that state house? Did they forget? Did they just pass this legislation and they're in the middle of litigation? Did they forget? I'm trying not to call anybody any names because that's not the cool thing to do. But I question the mental integrity and the hypocrisy levels of some of our elected officials in that state house. Now, y'all, these are people that we are working to, unseat and flip seats in 2022. I want y'all to remember how not well this whole chain of events seems. At least it does to me. When I saw the report, I was like, are you serious? But this is what they're doing. So not only did they ask him to do something they passed legislation to not allow him to do, they're spending tax money, having a civil war, fighting it out. Y'all, I don't know about y'all. That just is a whole nother level of GOP-ness. That's the only thing I can call it, because I'm trying not to call nobody any names. But they struggling. They struggling. And, if they want to come talk to somebody and talk it out, I'm available, because they own a whole bunch of mess. And yes, if it wasn't true, it would be funny. That's all I can say. All right, Indiana's own Dana Black, that is my rant for the day. Now, sometimes you get lucky and you'll have the opportunity to interview some amazing people who are doing amazing things in our state. Not just talking about it, but they're being about it. And if you saw my posts, my social media posts, I talked about this individual is catching all the smoke. And before I introduce him, I want you to know, had I been able to vote when he was caucused in, yes, I would have voted for him. And let me explain why real quick. As much as I love Tim Moriarty, I think Tim Moriarty is an amazing guy, and he's a dang good Democrat. In fact, he's been appointed counsel of our party recently. I think he is an amazing guy. But I was traumatized at the idea that he hadn't actually prosecuted any cases. And so for a black woman who lives in who grew up in Indianapolis, I remember Stephen Goldsmith. I remember what it was like to have prosecutors who may not necessarily have the experience. And so for me, I can say it now. I'm not the deputy chair of the party anymore. I can say what I really feel like. You know what I'm saying? It was just a scary notion that somebody was going to take over our office that had no experience when we had more than capable someone who was the prosecutor in the interim and has been banging it out the box ever since. Y'all give it up for my man, Marion County Prosecutor Ryan Mears. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on here. I've been looking forward to this appearance for a while, and I get a chance to talk to a lot of great people, but this is one I'm really looking forward to, and because I know we're going to get into some serious issues and have a substantive discussion, and I always look forward to that.
Absolutely. But before we get started, over the weekend, we all participated in a virtual hug for a retired prosecutor, Terry Curry. He is going through some things, and we wanted to make sure he knew that he was uplifted. Could you tell us what his mentorship has meant to you before we get started and all that other good stuff?
I'm the luckiest person in the world. I got to learn from the best in Terry, and just the way he treated people and his approach to the job in terms of not only the professionalism, but also just he had such a big heart and a great heart for people, and that's really what shined through. And you mentioned kind of the virtual hug we gave people. It was just a great reminder of all the people that Terry has touched. And he was one of those people who took his job very seriously, but didn't take himself seriously. And I think that really translated into him having these, a tremendous impact on people and developed these really enduring relationships. And so I feel like I'm a better prosecutor. I'm a better husband. I'm a better father because of all the things I've learned from Terry over the course of those years that I was with him. And so I feel like I got to learn from the best dad, the best mentor, the best boss anybody could ever possibly have. And so I'm just incredibly fortunate for those experiences and grateful that Terry and I were able to share so many cool moments.
I love it. That is beautiful. Thank you for that. Now, to the current prosecutor, tell the people who you are and where you come from.
Hopefully a place of reason. So my name is Ryan Mears. I'm a Marion County prosecutor right here in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I've been the prosecutor for about 18 months now. I took over for Terry, who had to step down for health reasons. And really what I've tried to do and what my message has tried to be to the community is, like you, I grew up in Indianapolis. I went to school on the west side of Indianapolis. I love Indianapolis. But I also saw that in the criminal justice system in particular, there were some things that could be improved, and there were some things maybe that we could do a little bit differently to even out the playing field and acknowledge some of the racial discrepancies that take place in the criminal justice system. And really that's tried to, been my priority from day one is if we have a system that treats everybody a little bit more fairly, we're going to have a system that protects everyone. As a consequence, we're going to get more people who buy in and trust the system, which I think will, really reduce our violent crime, which is something that we're obviously struggling with right now. So for me, everything is all about the issue of fairness and making sure that we treat people fairly. I think a lot of people, I kind of generated a little bit of attention because one of the first things I did was made the decision to no longer prosecute marijuana cases. And that was driven by that desire to make sure everybody was treated fairly. And when we looked at the numbers, it disproportionately impacted people of color. And that's not, if you look at the raw numbers and you see the impact things are having and you don't do anything and you don't make any changes, you've officially become part of the problem. And so I think it was important for us to just right off the bat demonstrate that this was the type of leadership we were going to exhibit when we were dealing with these challenges.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so one thing that most people that come on the show know, I don't toss out any questions in advance to my interviewers or interviewee because I want it to be like a conversation. And at the Hoosier Women Forward graduation, a little angel whispered in my ear and said that you like little tougher, stronger conversations. So no more Miss Nice Lady softball Democratic Party interviews. This is going to be Indiana's own Dana Black talking to Prosecutor Mears. Is that all right with you, sir?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's chop it up.
Let's do this. So my first question, people have a view of the prosecutor's office as it's the last stop, right, before jail or prison. And like your predecessor, you're starting to put some programs in place that are different. I want to start with this common sense program that you started back in 2019, 2020. Tell us about the Good Faith Initiative.
Yeah, and really, it starts with kind of changing the mindset of what should we expect from a prosecutor's office. Our number one goal is not to punish people. Our goal is what can we do to help people change behavior. And when I talk to people in the community, I ask them, what are things that we can do to help you be better members of the community? And why is it that you're struggling or maybe had some setbacks? And one of the issues was the issues of child support. And so what we started with was our Good Faith Initiative, and it's very simple. It works like this. There's a lot of people out there, in particular people who have been incarcerated, who owe a ton of money back child support. For those of you who don't know, the state of Indiana automatically suspends your driver's license when you haven't been able to make a child support payment. If you miss 3 consecutive months, automatically get suspended. And so we, as a consequence, we had all these people in our community who had their driver's license suspended. They weren't able to get a job. They weren't able to have reliable transportation. They couldn't participate in their kids' lives because they couldn't drive. They couldn't pick them up from school. They couldn't take them to church. Couldn't take them to the doctor. And a lot of them weren't able to get employment because they didn't have a job. And so what could we do to change that? And so I basically said, all right, I'm going to use the law, as much latitude as the law gives me. And I told people, I said, you tell me what you can pay. I don't care what it is. It can be $1. But you tell me what you can pay. And you make a good faith effort towards that child support obligation. I can't modify the monthly payment. I can't modify what you owe, but you tell me what you can pay and you pay it. And I'm going to reinstate your driver's license. And we literally had hundreds of people take advantage of this program, and they're now driving on the streets. And I think it's important to note that 75% of the people who participated in this program had not paid a dollar, had not paid a single dollar towards their child support obligation. So we're bringing in a whole new class of people, a whole new group of people into paying towards their child support. They now are able to drive, and because they have that driver's license, it's easier to participate in their kids' life. It's easier to get a job. And we really think we're helping people get back on the right track. And as we've tracked these individuals, most of the people who participated in this program continue to make those payments. And so we're proud of kind of the success that we had with that program.
And see, I never understood why when you're penalizing people who haven't paid child support, you make it more difficult for them to obtain funds to pay child support. Goldsmith. That's why I said traumatized. So you also launched another program earlier this year called the Conviction Integrity Unit. Tell us about this program.
Yeah, so one of the things, and again, this is another initiative that's really just driven from the community. I am someone who has publicly stated I do think there is systematic racism in the criminal justice system. And I think there have been times when the criminal justice system has not always gotten it right. And so we try to do a lot of things, and I try to be very proactive in terms of making sure that we don't make those same mistakes moving forward. But there's a whole generation of people who had to live under circumstances that were maybe not totally fair, and they had to live with outcomes that weren't necessarily just. And I thought to myself, if I'm saying these systematic issues existed, if I'm saying they were out there, then I have an obligation to look into it. And so what we did is we started the first ever conviction integrity unit in the state of Indiana. I hired 2 public defenders because I wanted people who are used to digging into a case and taking apart a case. And they have access to the prosecutor's file. They have access to the police department file. And I tell them, if we got it wrong, you tell me, and we're going to release people. And we're going to set aside convictions because it's the right thing to do. The only person who benefits from a wrongful conviction is the person who actually did it. And so, we need to make sure that we are taking that responsibility to look backwards and say, okay, every conviction that came out of Marion County, we want to make sure it was based on the law and the facts and applying the law to those facts and not based on anything else. And if it was, we have an obligation to right that wrong. And, we can't give this responsibility to somebody else. It's on us. And that's why it was so important to start this unit. And, they're already doing great work, and we're already working towards working through cases. We've actually released 2 individuals pursuant to this program. I think it's very important that we take all the steps necessary so that everybody in Marion County can have confidence in the convictions that come out of here.
And you know what? And I love that because typically a program like that, like the Innocence Project, is a nonprofit organization that started up by defense attorneys or advocacy groups. Why did you feel like it was important that a government agency I mean, because you could have done this, on your own or given money or something like that. Why did you think it was important that a government agency took on this role?
Well, number one, it's something that the community wanted. And, I work for the community. The community doesn't work for me. And so the community is telling me, hey, this is something that we think we need. And number two, I think it sends a powerful message to the community that we really are just concerned with getting it right. And we want to produce the right result. And your budget's always a reflection of your priorities. And so if you put resources towards this, I think it demonstrates to the community how important it is. It demonstrates to everybody in the prosecutor's office who works there how important this issue is. And the other thing is, I have a significant advantage over all those other nonprofits and everything else. I have access to the file, and they don't. And so if I have this opportunity that the private groups don't necessarily have, and me as a prosecutor, I have the subpoena power, and I have the ability to not ask people, but tell people you have to give me things, then I need to use that power for good to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And that extends to everything that we did in the past as well.
I'm curious. I want to meet your parents. That's what I want to do. So, okay. Now, you've been catching all the smoke. Baby, every time you walk away from the podium and come back, you are catching the heat. Because you are just, I'm just going to put it out there. You're not behaving. You're not cooperating. You have made some really bold moves. Discuss again, I want to go back to this. Discuss your thoughts behind deciding not to prosecute people who have less than 30 grams of marijuana. I'm not even going to ask you if you are for decriminalizing it, but if you choose to share, prosecutor, feel free.
Well, we should decriminalize it. And the reason we decided to make that decision to no longer prosecute marijuana is because it disproportionately impacted people of color. If you look at marijuana usage rates amongst African American, amongst Caucasians, amongst Asians, Hispanics, and then you look at who ends up in the criminal justice system, those cases were overwhelmingly against African Americans. And that's just not fair. And, I took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and the Equal Protection Clause very clearly states that the law has to apply equally to everyone. When I looked at those cases in Marion County, it was not applying equally to everyone, because if you were, it's 6 o'clock or 6:30 on race weekend in Indianapolis. I got news for you. There's white people smoking marijuana right now. But the likelihood that they're going to get pulled over is significantly less than if you're an African American. And that's who ended up in the criminal justice system. The other part of it is it's a waste of time. Not everything can be a priority. And, we've got a problem with violent crime, and I'd much rather have police officers and detectives working really hard to figure out who's committing that violent crime and not spend an hour and a half on the side of the road arresting someone, processing someone over a small amount of marijuana that has no nexus to public safety. And so I'm proud we made that decision. I think it's the right decision to make, and I hope the legislature exercises a common sense approach to this issue of marijuana. But it's absolutely the right thing to do. It keeps people out of the criminal justice system, and we were unnecessarily penalizing an entire class of people, and it's just epitomizes everything that's wrong with what we're doing in the criminal justice system and why people had such significant complaints about what was going on in the criminal justice system.
Oh, absolutely. And apparently, there's some folks, man, that just ain't liking the way you are running that office, right? I mean, you got Senator Mike Young, who authored SB 200 earlier this year. It actually passed out of the Senate, but it got stalled in the House, thank goodness. But SB 200 was essentially a bill to restrict your ability to decide which cases you were going to prosecute. When you saw that didn't come out of, first of all, when you saw the bill, I know you were like, no, whatever happened to home rule? Because I know I kind of have an idea. But when you saw this, and I'm certain some folks asked you your opinion, what did you think about that bill when it came down? Because that was an attack on you and the way you choose to run the city of Indianapolis, the prosecutor's office.
Yeah, I think it was even more disheartening when you look at what happened this summer with all the civil unrest and all the protests and everything that happened this summer, where we had some really legitimate and honest conversations about some of the problems we had in the criminal justice system and how it has disproportionately impacted people of color. And the Indiana legislature's takeaway from all of those conversations was we need to do more things to make sure we're putting more Black people in jail. I mean, that's basically the crux of what they took out of the protests that took place this summer. And that's disheartening. And, I'm glad it failed in the House, but as you pointed out, it passed in the Senate. The people of Marion County know what's best for the people of Marion County. And I can tell you, and this is across the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, no matter who, there's a lot of people who don't necessarily like all of my policies. Pretty much universally across the board, when I talk to people, they'll always pull me aside and say, I really like what you did on the marijuana issue. My father uses CBD oil because he suffers from pain, or I have a cousin who went to the military and they've got PTSD and marijuana really helps. Or I just like to recreationally use marijuana on my back porch or smoke a joint before I go to bed. I hear those stories all the time. So I think it was the right thing to do, but it's disheartening for me that we can have all these really productive conversations about the civil unrest, why that civil unrest occurred, why were people protesting, why were they demonstrating, and the Indiana legislature's takeaway from that is we need to make sure that we have more punitive laws and that we punish more people. And if that comes at the expense of Black and brown people, we're okay with it.
Of course they are. They're more than okay with it. And here's the deal. Not too many people will articulate that exactly the way that you did. They will ho-hum around about it. They will not be clear with it, because they're always worried about what's coming around the corner. I'm just going to say this, first of all, I know how sincere you are because you and I have had real conversations off camera. But this is what allyship looks like. And when we can have allyship in our criminal justice system, and it's not just good police officers versus bad police officers, you got to have good courts. This is what we're talking about, people. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about somebody that understands the importance of our lives. You were about to say something?
No, I just appreciate a forum to have an honest conversation about it. I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about, too oftentimes we're unwilling to address the challenging issue or just call things for what they are. And that's what happened this session. And we need to call it what it is. And there's no reason to dance around the issue. This is what they did, and this is why they did it. And I hope that doesn't sit well with people.
Absolutely. So let's turn to a little bit more of a sober subject. You caught some smoke from, and I'm calling it smoke just for that. You caught a lot of smoke from the FOP and state Republican legislatures about not pursuing a red flag hearing for that silly little individual who took the lives of 8 FedEx employees this year, including 4 members of our Sikh community. They say you didn't follow procedure. Can you offer some clarification on the red flag law and whether or not this particular individual needed to have a hearing?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is this law worked out exactly the way the Indiana Republican legislature wanted it to work out, which is it's really hard to take away someone's gun, and the red flag law is not a gun control piece of legislation. What it does is it allows law enforcement to take the gun away from someone who is having going through a mental health issue, which is exactly what happened in this case. What we have to prove and what we have to demonstrate is someone has to demonstrate a propensity of violent behavior or a propensity of mental health issues. And in this particular case, the propensity on violence, we didn't have any acts of violence. And on the mental health issue, it's very clearly defined as does this person have a history of being prescribed medication and a history of not taking that medication. This person was not prescribed any medication. And on top of that, he was immediately detained, and he spent less than 12 hours in that facility, and he was cut loose. And so we, as the prosecutor's office, are put in the position of saying, Judge, we know medical professionals just evaluated this person and said everything's fine. But in our expert opinion, we disagree. And the failure with the law, where the law could be improved, is why don't we expand that timeline and not require it to be such a tight turnaround, so we have more of an opportunity to actually access someone's mental health records, subpoena their mental health records, do a search warrant on their mental health records, which the current law doesn't allow us to do, so we can really make that deep dive and make a decision based on the best available information. But when you just had a single isolated incident, really what the law allowed you to do is take the firearm, which we did, and make sure it's not returned, which we did. And if you want it to be something more than that, that's fine. But let's change the law so the procedure is fair to everybody involved.
Well, see, and I find it interesting, and I wonder if you do too, that, the FOP is hitting you about not taking this man's gun or taking the man's gun and not having some extra eyes on him. But the Indiana GOP every year tries to pass constitutional carry bills that would allow, Hoosiers to purchase guns without a permit. Meaning, you wouldn't be able to track the purchase of the gun if there's no permit that they have to fill out. So your red flag law that they're claiming you didn't follow wouldn't actually work. So what are your thoughts on the fact that now the FOP has actually said they don't like the constitutional carry, so let me be clear. But the state legislatures are trying to pass constitutional carry and then hold you accountable for a red flag law with that gaping loophole in it. Talk to me about how you see that.
Yeah, and just to be clear to everybody on here, I've pointed out this loophole for a long time. Like, this is not the first time I've raised this issue. The problem with the red flag law is that even if your gun gets taken away, you can still go out and buy more guns. You can go to any place. You can buy it. You can buy it online. You can buy it from a gun store. You can buy it off of Craigslist. You can buy it from your neighbor. You still have all these avenues and opportunities to purchase firearms because there's no regulation for the purchase and sale of firearms in the state of Indiana. And so if these individuals had any genuine concern for this issue, they could very easily pass a law saying there has to be some level of background check or regulation, a state regulation, which currently there are none, no requirements except you cannot sell it to a person less than 18 years of age. That's the only thing in the state of Indiana. So that's the first part of it. And that's a loophole that we've constantly brought up as it relates to the red flag law. But, the Tuesday before this happened, we had people on the House floor celebrating because they passed constitutional carry, meaning that there was going to be no restriction on firearms, meaning anybody at any point in time can walk around and carry a handgun and there's no regulation. They can do that right now with a gun, with an AK-47. There's no permitting requirement. They think it's a good idea for everybody to have access to an AK. And they wanted to do the same thing for handguns, which is why it's so disingenuous for them to turn around and pretend like the red flag law was some form of gun control piece of legislation. That's never what it was. It's never what it was designed to do. And if it was, it wouldn't have made it out of the House and the Senate because we know how they feel about gun control.
Well, exactly. It would have never made it out. But I guess for me, you much cooler than I am. I'm a little bit hype. But it's just maddening sometimes when I watch the level of, I'm going to point the finger at you because I don't want to write any legislation that's going to prevent people who shouldn't have weapons from firearms from having firearms. They want to put the blame on you.
Yeah, and what's crazy about it is, we had a case where a 1-year-old girl was murdered. She was murdered by someone who purchased an AR-15, which is an assault-style rifle, from a gun show at the Indiana State Fairgrounds, took that gun and shot and killed a 1-year-old. And we convicted the person responsible for that incident. I didn't hear a single one of those Indiana legislatures accept any blame or take any responsibility for the fact that someone could purchase an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle at that gun show and not have a single background check. And they took no responsibility for the fact that when I convicted that person of murder, they weren't convicted of a single gun charge because there wasn't one to be filed because his possession of that firearm was completely legal and unregulated. And so just that glaring hypocrisy is, just something that unfortunately we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And maybe I need to do a better job of pointing out what happened to that 1-year-old. And this isn't like 10 years ago. This is 2 years ago that this happened. And it just goes to illustrate the challenges that we face.
So, Indianapolis has unfortunately graduated from that town to the OK Corral. Real talk. We have communities around here that they resort to the weapon. And I personally think it's a little unfair to blame the mayor for gun violence in our communities. Um, I believe that there are policies and probably some programs that the office and the city can put in place to encourage people to find other avenues to explore their minds, because an idle mind is a devil's workshop. I do believe that. But I think that he catches a little bit more heat than he should. It's not like he's out doing the shooting or the patrolling or the prosecuting. He's setting policy. How do you, when you see all the cases, and I know you see a lot of cases, when you see the cases coming through and you see the level of gun violence, and sometimes it's not even gun violence, domestic violence, it's all these other things. How does your office prioritize all of these different instances to make sure that people who should be convicted are being convicted?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing is, number one, we've expanded the number of people who are assigned to handle violent crime, and that's an unfortunate reality because we've just seen an increase in cases. But we've also looked at what can we do to help with the challenges that people face that lead them to become involved in violent crime. I'm a big believer that if you don't want people to commit violent crime, I think for young people, there has to be a genuine hope and opportunity for them to be successful, for them to see a successful future. And for people who are out of school age, I think it very much comes down to economic opportunity and jobs. If you have people who feel like they have an opportunity to get a good job or they have a job, those people are not involved in violent crime. And, I think that's part of the equation. I think the second part of it is just we have a real fundamental challenge between the community and law enforcement. And there's just not that level of trust. And because there's that lack of trust, we just have this terrible cycle of violence. If you look at the Marion County and the city of Indianapolis, there's been over 500 non-fatal shootings that have occurred. 75% of those non-fatal shootings, individuals tell the police, I'm not going to cooperate with you. I'm not going to tell you what happened. And so because of that, we get in this terrible cycle where we have these levels of retaliation. But there's that lack of trust between law enforcement and the community where the community doesn't want to talk. And so we have got to do things to help restore and build that trust if we're ever going to turn the corner on these issues. And that's why I think it's so important that everybody in government, every single branch needs to think to themselves, what can we do? What service can we offer? What can we personally do to help make the community have more confidence and trust in the criminal justice system, in the prosecutor's office, in the police department, in the judicial system, to help try to repair that trust? Because if we don't do that, we're not going to do anything to undercut the current level of violence that we are seeing. And so those, I think, are two important steps that we need to take in order to make a dent in the challenges that we're facing right now.
Well, I saw that you released a stat that said that you have a 73% conviction rate. I don't know if I want to call it success rate, but you're doing your job, right? You're doing your job.
Right. Yeah. And that's, but I think the part of it, we've been very fortunate. We've convicted someone of murder today. We went to trial. We were successful. And it always feels good to be able to say that and to hold people accountable and bring justice for those families. And that's a responsibility we take very seriously. But the other part of that is we just have got to, we can't just say, hey, we're just going to convict everybody who comes through here.
Right.
We need to be more proactive to address the challenges that I just mentioned. And we need to be out in the community trying to build those relationships. The goal of us has to be not to punish. What are we going to do to help change behavior? How can we help change behavior? Sometimes that's reducing barriers. Sometimes that's getting people to the services they need. But that has to be our focus if we're truly going to address this problem of violent crime that's currently plaguing our city.
Absolutely. And normally I don't do this, but I'm even gonna ask a question that someone posted on my Facebook page. Okay.
Okay.
So Rick Snyder, it seems to be a narrative out there being tossed around that those who have been convicted and are on electronic monitoring and are let go are are committing more crimes. Based on the data in your office, can you speak to that accusation of whether or not the people that we're putting out on electronic monitoring versus keeping them caged up are actually committing a significantly higher amount of crime?
So we currently, right now, as we sit here, have 194 pending homicide cases in Marion County, which we have filed and charged defendants. Of those 194, 22 of those individuals were released on bond. That doesn't mean they were on GPS, just released on bond. So when you are talking about this in its totality, it's about 10% of the people who end up being a homicide defendant. And so it's a lazy narrative. It's an easy narrative. It's a good way to try to make people scared, but it's not connected to reality. And, that's what some people, that's one way they choose to address the topic, but it's not really a solution to the problem that we're facing. If you look at who's charged with homicides, a lot of times it's individuals where they don't have that significant criminal history. They certainly were not released on bond. And so I think that's an important question for people to be asking. It's an important answer that people need to hear. The numbers just don't add up in that particular way. I'm not a big fan of electronic monitoring. I don't like it for a variety of reasons, but that's not why we're in the position we're in today.
Well, I don't like it because it's a money making scheme, But then we're getting rid of private prisons, but we're creating we're gonna charge you a whole bunch of money to stay home. I mean, it's
crazy.
Yeah,
it's $14 a day, and we create this perverse incentive system to put people on electronic monitoring. It makes absolutely no sense. In the criminal justice system, it needs to be about fairness, not what can people pay and how much can people pay and when can they pay it. That should never be a part of the equation. That should never even be part of the conversation. And that's why I'm against electronic monitoring in many cases, because what we're doing is we are creating industries that are designed to essentially, extort money from people. I mean, there's no other way to say it. At $14 a day,
that's it.
For people who have little or no financial margin for air. That $14 can be put towards groceries, rent, all sorts of things that are way more productive than electronic monitoring. And so I have a real philosophical problem with it. But the people who are on electronic monitoring are not the people who are out here committing these murders.
Come on now. Now, one thing that we hear all the time, and I'm going to kind of switch up a little bit. We hear that, our law enforcement, they have to deal with some of the not so nicest people in our community. And then they lose their cool, whatever. But we also know that as a prosecutor, in order for you to get convictions from people who really deserve to be convicted, you have to get the cooperation from law enforcement. How are you able to balance that fine line? Because I saw how you handled the protests last summer and dealing with law enforcement and saying, hey, you are being way over the top. Now, I was going to say a little bit heavy-handed. I was going to be nice. No, but they was being way over the top, beating up people, tear gassing, stealing their water, doing all of this silliness. And you saw it as a prosecutor. How were you able to say, okay, I gotta hold y'all to a higher standard because you are being paid by the tax dollars to protect, and also, wait a minute, I need your cooperation on this crime. How do you walk that line?
It's a difficult line to walk. And I think there are some people in law enforcement who don't really care for me. But
I got that problem too, dog. So
right, I'm in good company. But I mean, it's my job to be independent. We are to be independent, and I'm not going to be a rubber stamp for the police department. And there's going to be things that we're going to push back on, and we need to hold law enforcement accountable, and we need to raise the standard. And if we're just an agent or an arm of the police department, we're not doing our job, and we're not helping the community. And so, there is a tension there. It's a natural tension, though, where we're going to tell law enforcement no. Sometimes they understand, sometimes they do not. But I think it's very important and vital that the prosecutor's office maintains its independence from everybody, because we get a lot of information from the police. We work from the police on a day-by-day basis, but we also have to be in a position to tell the police that's not good enough, or you need to do better, or you yourself might have crossed that line and you're going to be charged with a crime. And I know they don't always like hearing that, especially from me. But that's the way the system's designed. And when the system works well, it is because all of us are doing our job and all of us are acting independently and in the best interest of the community.
I love it. I love it. And it speaks to, the Chauvin trial. And we just passed the anniversary. I'm having a brain freeze. Help me out. Oh my goodness. Come on. Help me, y'all.
George Floyd.
Yes, thank you. I'm 50, y'all. I'll be 51 in a couple of weeks. Work with me. And I have a cocktail every now and then, so work with me. But it speaks to George Floyd a year later. If we didn't have someone like if they didn't have someone like the Attorney General Ellison in Minnesota, those charges probably wouldn't have been brought against those police officers. I kind of, in my opinion, and it's just mine, I liken you to him and how you view, the job of a prosecutor. Obviously, he's on the state level. Maybe you'll get there one day. But you're on the local level. And I kind of liken you to that style of, listen, let me get a team together. Let's do this right. We want to go by the rule of law. And guess what? You're not even a black Muslim.
Right. Right. Well, first of all, it's a tremendous compliment. So thank you, because they do great work up there. And I've heard him speak a number of times, and I think he always preaches that same issue of independence. There just has to be a level of independence to how you approach these types of issues. And I think you also have to be transparent with the public to the extent that you can, because if you don't, the public kind of fills in those blanks on their own. And they're not always the most flattering to people involved in the justice system, and I think it kind of lets people's minds run wild sometimes. And so you need to be forthcoming, but you have to be independent.
I love it. Okay, so now I imagine probably one of the hardest jobs, one of the hardest aspects of your job, is when you should have gotten that conviction and you didn't. How is it for you when you have to go back to the victim's family or the victim, and what are those conversations like? Obviously, you can't give me details, but
Yeah, those are some of the toughest things you have to deal with as a prosecutor, is feeling like you let down a victim, or you were in a position where you weren't able to bring justice to that victim's family. And those are some of the most difficult conversations we have in the Marion County Prosecutor's Office, and something that's really challenging that everybody has to go through. But again, you have to be honest with people, and you have to explain, okay, this is where we are, this is why we got here, or how we got here. And the other thing is, you have to have respect for the process. If you are willing to accept the victories and the times that you are able to convict someone using that same process, then you also have to be willing to accept some of the not guilties, or some of the times when maybe things don't work out the way you want. And so it's a challenge. But you always try to help people get through those moments. It's not about us. It's about the family and what they're going through, and what can you help those families do to help get through those moments or those trying situations. And I had a not guilty on a murder case where I was one of the prosecutors involved. And I still have a great relationship with the family to this day, because we worked really hard to try to help that family get through that very trying and difficult time. I'm professionally frustrated, and you feel like you gave it your all, but they lost a family member. Right. And they're going through a pain that you can't even imagine. And so you immediately need to switch into that gear of not only how can I demonstrate compassion, but how can I help them work through this incredibly challenging set of circumstances. And that's something that we really spend a lot of time on through our victim advocate programs and other things, to make sure we're giving people the resources to help them get through some really, really challenging circumstances.
I'm going to need you to not make me emotional on my own dang show. I'm going to need you to not do that. Because, that doesn't happen very often. But just listening to you talk about the importance of the family. I know I had put in my post that you see the human before the offense. You see the family outside of your, yes, it's your job to be the prosecutor, but I feel like whenever you're working with a family, all you're doing is giving them big giant hugs, like, I'm here. I mean, I just listening to you tell that.
Yeah, and I think that's why how you develop that relationship with the family is not only being well prepared and good in the courtroom, but demonstrating that you care and showing everybody, hey, this is we're here for you, and what can we do to help. I think if you approach, if anyone, no matter what your job is, when you approach it from the perspective of what can we do to help, what can we do to help you get through this situation, a lot of times that helps you produce really good results. And one of the things that we look for in our prosecutors is prosecutors to make sure that they care about people, that they understand that this is a people-driven business, and you have to be able to relate to people who are going through really challenging times, and you have to put in that energy and effort to help that person. And it's not going to work on a 9-to-5 schedule. You have to be there when people need you. And it might be 10 o'clock at night, or it might be on a Saturday or a Sunday. That's kind of what the job requires. But if you make that investment, you're going to produce some incredible relationships with people, long-lasting relationships with people, and you're also going to help people get through some of their darkest and most challenging times.
Yeah, you mentioned your team. Talk about some of the because everyone should understand by now, you do not prosecute every case.
Right.
Talk about your team in your office setting.
Well, yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, we have 415 people that work at the Marion County Prosecutor's Office, and about 180 of those individuals are deputy prosecutors. The rest are support staff, which means they're victim advocates, they're investigators, they're paralegals, legal assistants, interns, part-time employees, and everything in between. And we have a great team. And really, the reason we have a great team is we really try to find people who are working toward a common goal and a common mission, and that's really a unifying force for all of us. And so just got to give credit to Terrence Stark, who's my chief trial deputy, who runs kind of the trial side of things. Salita Scott's my chief legal counsel, who does a fantastic job on that. She has the toughest job in the city because she only has one client, me, but I'm not always the best listener, so it's a challenge for her. Peg McLeish, who's my chief of staff, who keeps things running on a day-to-day basis, and then Emily Schrock, who's the master of everything, and really helps us with a lot of these strategic initiatives that we've talked about, whether it's the good faith, the second chance fairs, the conviction integrity review, and all of these things where we're really trying to push forward in a way that promotes fairness. Emily's got her hands in all of that, and I just feel very fortunate to get to work with those individuals.
I love it, and I love that the office isn't just about convictions. It's and I hate to. It's about you, and I get that, but I go back to the first time I had a conversation with Prosecutor Terry Curry, and I didn't know all of the things that he was working on as a prosecutor, as the prosecutor for Marion County, and he started breaking down all this stuff. And I kind of had a clue, right, when I would be talking to you, because that's it. You're his lineage. And to hear you say, I'm going to take it a step further. I'm going to grow this community-focused view of who the prosecutor's office is. Man, that's dope.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And I hope that's the way what people want to see from government and from prosecutors' offices, not only in Indianapolis, but around the state. I think we're past the days of just prosecutors standing up here and saying, hey, look at how many people I convicted, therefore I must be great. What are you doing to help the community?
Right.
What are you doing that's having that lasting impact on the community to keep people out of the prison? What are you doing to help keep people out of the criminal justice system? What are you doing to promote fairness? Those are the things that the community really wants and needs. And I think, that's very much the direction that we are going. And the response from the community has been pretty positive. And, we try to listen to what the community wants. What can we do to promote fairness? How can we achieve that? And you have to make it actionable. You said something at the beginning of the show that I loved is you said, you can't talk about it. You have to be about it. And, I want to be able to point to, this is what I've done to promote equity. This is what I've done to promote fairness in the criminal justice system. This is what I've done to try to show and demonstrate to the community that we care about you, the person. If I just look at my job as, hey, who am I prosecuting today? And let's give them the maximum penalty. I haven't served the community well. I probably haven't served that defendant well. And we're going to end up in a far worse position 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now than we are today, because we're not treating the person or the individual. We're just trying to put everybody in jail, which just doesn't work.
Right, and we've already seen that, right? We've already seen where mass incarceration doesn't do anything for anybody's community at all, and it would be different, and it's still a bad thing if it was more equitable. I mean, it's just the only thing that we lead in as far as African Americans is being incarcerated. That's just, so it's not even equitable how the law, and that's why I labeled it criminal justice reform, because you and I could talk about all the things that are going on and how it appears and what's happening. But I felt like in order to really talk about criminal justice reform, we have to talk about what you're actually doing, right?
Yeah. And that's the part that's frustrating for me is, when we talk about these conversations about equity or changes in the criminal justice system, and it's just a conversation. It's 2021. We are a century overdue. So it's time to get to work and actually start to implement these changes. We don't need any more committees. We don't need any more hearings. We all understand the issues. The criminal justice system has not been fair to people of color across the board. What are we going to do to reduce those discrepancies? The criminal justice system does not always going to get it right. What are we going to do to reduce those discrepancies? We have a real issue with policing in terms of who we police and how we police those individuals. What are we going to do to fix that and get that right? And, a year from now, 2 years from now, whenever, those conversations, people need to have concrete, fundamental things that they can say that they've done, or else maybe it's time to look for different leadership.
Hello, I mean, you don't know or it don't show. What they say, you old school, like, well, not really, but it's like that. So I got one last question. You have to view a lot of material. You have to look at crime scene information, crime scene photos. I just talked about how, police officers, and I know I'm not supposed to call them police officers, but that's, let me have that. They have to deal and see things, and sometimes they behave abhorrently towards the community that they're supposed to be protecting. How are you able to look at the things that you have to look at, and once you see something, you can't unsee it? How do you maintain your goodwill towards men and not become jaded and stay positive?
Because the victims and the victim's family are the most incredible people in the world. You meet so many people who have experienced tremendous loss and tremendous pain, and then you see the incredible class and dignity that they carry themselves with, and it's just the most inspiring thing you could ever see. And I have that privilege every day of getting to see that with individuals who have lost family members, individuals who have suffered just incredible pain. Could be physical, it could be emotional, could be mental. And you see how they carry themselves, how they conduct themselves. And that is just so entirely inspiring. And we do see the worst. We do see terrible, awful things. And it can be tough to see those things. In particular, things with small kids are just really tough for me to handle. But when you talk to those survivors, when you talk to the mother, when you talk to all those individuals involved, and you see just the way they carry themselves, I mean, that's what's inspiring, and that's what keeps you going, because you're standing up for them. You're providing justice for them. You're protecting the people who cannot stand up for themselves. And that's really what I try to take out of all these terrible situations, is just the incredible people that I get to meet and watch how they work themselves through just really challenging situations. And so anytime I start to complain or think about things, I think about all those victims I've talked to. I think about all those victims' families that I've met with. And it's a really good reminder of, number one, things aren't that bad. And
right?
Number two, the human spirit is incredible. And I'll tell you, it's contagious. And so when you get to be around great people like that, it can't help but inspire you.
All right. 2019, Marion County Precinct Committee people, Y'all got it right. Y'all got it right. There's nothing better than making a choice, and that choice is the right choice. Congratulations. Now, this was a straight up, all the way live, prosecutor conversation. I got to bring you back when you're a candidate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully, I've seen you do these shows live too. Hopefully, we can do it live.
Hey, yo, check this out. Nobody really cares, but I'm gonna share it anyway. I have done some rearranging in the studio, so like I can literally set up like a table and bring 2 chairs. I'm gonna get some fake trees and get I'm working on some things. We gonna chop it up for real. But this is why you guys, people always ask, how can you get involved? How do I have an impact in the community? Last week, right after my show, the state party had a training on how to become a precinct committee person. When Prosecutor Curry had to step down because of health reasons, the part of the job of a precinct committee person is to caucus in who would take over that elected official's role. And the PCs in Marion County said, we want Ryan Mears. You could have had a voice. I didn't have one, but I'm not going to go there. I'm not bitter or anything. I'm not. But you can have a voice. This is one of the jobs. When you get a chance to get it right, we got it right. This man is about the community. Yes, he's got a law degree. Yes, he's been he's a prosecutor prosecuting cases, but he's a human first. And that's how we need to see him. He sees us as human. We need to see him as human. And then we're going to bring him back in 2022 so we can raise him some money. I can't talk about it on this show because we're prosecuting today. But when he's a candidate, we can do fundraisers and all kind of fun stuff on behalf of him. And because, he talked about so many initiatives, if you see something or heard something that clicked with you, the link to the prosecutor's office is in this live feed. Click on that, read that information for yourself, and know that our Marion County prosecutor ain't just about locking people up. He's about helping to improve the community, and you can't ask for anything better than that. Prosecutor Mears, thank you so much for joining us, man. I was kind of giddy about this. I kind of asked like 2 years ago, hey, I guess you had to get your feet wet and make some noise first.
Well, I had to give you something to talk about. So I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to doing it again.
Absolutely. You're amazing. Keep up the good work, and let me know what I can do to help out. All right.
Absolutely.
All right, next week. Y'all know I got a good show next week. One of my favorite district chairs, one of my favorite county chairs, somebody I chops it up with, and we have a good time kikiing and laughing all of the time. Yup, you're not even gonna know. Yup. Mr. Adam Dickey is gonna be my guest, the district chair, a District 9 chair. He's been around a long time, and he has a lot of words of wisdom. I think y'all will enjoy it because we have a good time chopping it up together. So next week, tune back in because, again, it's not always not about the candidates. It's about sometimes you got to join in on the party work and do the dirty work so that we can flip some seats so that, Prosecutor Mears ain't fighting stupid bills because the people in the legislature want to run Indianapolis like they run the rest of the state. Get out of here. Thank goodness for Lilies and Cummins. People are like, yo, you're not getting money if you keep messing around in Indy. Yeah, they did that. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. Remember to consider becoming a Host Homes sponsor and look for my Trinity Haven fundraiser. I really do appreciate you guys tuning in. I will holler at y'all next week. Peace.